guys. Once again, Ben Lirette.
Yeah, so, as Logan said, my name is Ben Lirette. I'm a junior at LSU. I'm from Destrehan, Louisiana, like right outside of New Orleans. As I kind of said before, I went to Jesuit in New Orleans, and I learned a lot about the founder of the Jesuits, St. Ignatius, during my time there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about St. Ignatius' story. St. Ignatius was born in 1491 to a noble family in Spain. As a young man, he was known to kind of be like a ladies' man. He dreamed of honor and knighthood. He wanted to pursue chivalry and had a big personality. He joined the army at 17. During his time in the army, he seemed to continue this big head. He had a boisterous personality. He wanted to be the best knight that he could be, and he wanted to have the prettiest wife or woman. At the Battle of Pamplona in 1521, Ignatius was hit in the leg with a piece of a cannonball, leaving him bedridden for over a year. He was bedridden for over a year, and this is in the 1500s. They don't have phones, they don't have TVs, they don't have magazines. All they really have are books. So Ignatius, he asked for romantic books about chivalry, books about being a great knight. But they didn't have any of these books. They only had the life of Christ and the lives of the saints. During this time, Ignatius daydreamed a lot. Like I said, he didn't have a whole lot to do. And he tried to daydream. He did daydream about what he wanted in his former life before he'd been hit by the cannonball. He dreamed about having a beautiful wife or chasing after the most perfect, beautiful wife. He dreamed of being a great knight, being honored, and these things brought him temporary pleasure. They brought him temporary peace. It never really lasted, though. It was very difficult for him to sit with these things. When he began to really get in depth with the life of Christ, the lives of the saints, the books that he was reading, he really sought out these saints' lives and Jesus' life. Started to think about ways he could change his life. Ignatius ended up feeling very devoted to these books. He decided that when he was going to walk again, he was going to journey to the Holy Land, Jerusalem. So he was on his way there. Things were going fine. And his superior at the time told him, you can't go to Jerusalem. So all this thought that had gone into wanting to go to the Holy Land, devote more of his life to God, just didn't work out. Although his original plan didn't really work out, he continued to focus on prayer and time with the Lord. He was very persistent at this. Ignatius ended up becoming a priest. He ultimately founded the Jesuit order, one of the most influential in the church's history, very influential in this world as well. Notice throughout his life and throughout the beginning of his life, Ignatius chased societal pleasure. He thought that the things of the world could please him. This never really lasted for him. As he matured, he came to know God. And by God's grace, his life fell into place. You might be asking, why am I talking about St. Ignatius? Why am I starting out talking about St. Ignatius? I think his life is pretty applicable to a lot of our lives. I can tell you it's very applicable to my life at this point. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. Grew up in a Catholic household. I went to Catholic school most of my life. By high school, I thought I knew who Jesus was. I knew I'd been in religion classes, and when I wasn't in high school, I did CCD classes and confirmation classes. So I thought I knew this information. I didn't really know I didn't really have a deep prayer life at the time, though. I didn't really know who Jesus was in my life. Like St. Ignatius, I grew up in a society that valued status, chasing women, alcohol abuse, and a lot of different things that are contrary to what the church offers. Naturally, I believe these things were best for me in high school and the early parts of college. I thought that picking friends based on how they make me look towards others was the best for me. I believe that viewing women with little dignity at the time was going to be the best for me. I thought that doing things that I knew were not best for me at the time I thought that doing them to look cool in front of my other peers, that was going to be like the best for me. That was going to give me the most pleasure in life. Living the way that I did in high school and early parts of college ended up leaving me empty and unhappy. I wasn't really happy with who I was hanging around with. I just didn't really feel fulfilled. Like I said before, I grew up Catholic. I didn't, in high school, in high school and early parts of my life, I didn't really go to Mass every single Sunday. I was trying to go like maybe 2-3 times a month, maybe sometimes. But I came to college with a stronger desire for the Lord. I knew I wanted God in a deeper way. And I still had a few things holding me back, such as like pride, lust, like alcohol abuse at times, and a lot of other worldly things. And I still remember like one of the first weeks of my freshman year. It was like Labor Day weekend, and I was like busy with family stuff. Like we were doing Labor Day activities with the family, and I just like didn't go to Mass. I knew like I wasn't going to Mass, but I just like didn't really do anything about it. For some reason, it just made me think a little bit like, why am I halfway committed to God? If I know that God offers me eternal life in heaven, like why am I halfway in and halfway out? I didn't want to be like that anymore. I wanted to be committed to God. Since that time, I've overcome many of the vices that have plagued me for years, to just ones that I'd explained before. I've been able to find great friends and Christian examples that I can walk with in my life, my relationship with the Lord. One of these friends, during a meeting, we were just talking, hanging out, talking about some serious things, and he explained to me, and this comes from the Catechism of the Church, the purpose of a man's life is to know and to love God. The purpose of a man's life is to know and to love God. When I kind of contemplated this truth led me to ask more of like, God, like, what do you want me to do? I was very anxious in the earlier parts of my life, like thinking like I knew what I wanted to do, and I was in prayer, I would come to God all anxious, like, I think I want to do this, God, like, give this to me. So when I heard this, that the purpose of a man's life is to know and to love God, I really wanted to desire to spend time in prayer with him and figure out, like, first, before I enter in a relationship with you, like, I need to figure out, like, what do you want me to do? I've also strengthened my relationship with my girlfriend of over 4 years now. We started dating like the first couple months of my junior year of high school. We kind of realigned our desires for our relationship. When we first started dating, the first couple of years, we were young. We weren't really directing our relationship towards God. We were kind of focused on the current moment, the daily thing, what we were doing on the weekends, all of our activities, just like hanging out. We weren't really thinking about anything serious. We'd go to Mass on Sundays, but we wouldn't really talk about like how Mass was, or how our prayer life was going, or how our relationship with God was, or how our relationship with other people were. We just kind of went about our relationship. This kind of caused us to communicate poorly, and we didn't really know like what each other wanted for each other. We had different desires for each other many times. And I remember a little bit, probably about a year and a half ago, I was just hanging out with another close friend, just talking about life and what was going on, and I had mentioned some things about my girlfriend and my relationship with her. And he helped me to understand a few things, a few very important things, and one of these things was, he said, Ben, like, if you desire to be married one day, you're going to be responsible for getting your wife to heaven. For the first time, I was just kind of like, no one had ever told me that. I mean, maybe like, yeah, I guess you could make that assumption, but that was a pretty heavy thing for me. Like, I need to start cleaning myself up because I'm going to be responsible. A big part, of my life is going to be getting other people to heaven, other people that I care for. This is going to be my life's mission. And as my girlfriend and I have begun to live a more faithful life together, we begin to base our relationship more around like well-grounded, long-term future. This has changed everything. We began to include God more in our relationship, actually talk about the things that we struggle with, and talk about how our prayer life is going. How are you really doing? Throughout this process of the past few years, I've truly longed to be a better man. And although I definitely fall at times, I'm no perfect human. I try to find out what the Lord wants from me every day. Notice I wanted to be fulfilled by society. Over time, I've realized that only God and the people that God puts around me are really going to fulfill my life. And I just kind of talked about longing to be a better man and like, what does this vision of a better man look like? I'm going to kind of talk about some differences between boys and men of society and men of Christ. So I'm just going to start with a prayer here, and we can get going. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dearest Lord, teach me to be generous. Teach me to serve you as you deserve. To give and not to count the cost. To fight and not to bleed the wounds. To toil and not to seek for rest. To labor and not to ask for reward. Save that of knowing that I'm doing your will. Amen. Today our society kind of complains of a decline in true good men, yet at the same time kind of promotes feminine and boyish tendencies. Our society kind of promotes being promiscuous and a lot of things contrary to the church. St. Paul asks for strength in 1 Corinthians chapter 16 when he writes, "Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong. Your every act should be done with love." Ignatius also gives us the prayer for generosity, which we just prayed. And I'm going to kind of address some differences between boys and men, boys of society, men of society, and men of Christ. In the first line of the prayer, Lord Jesus, teach me to be generous. An example of this, we're in school, a lot of times, like, other guys or our classmates will like ask us for notes after we go to class, and they don't go to class. It's kind of aggravating. You see that, and you're tempted. Boys will probably pull up their phones and see that, kind of do a little half swipe on Snapchat, and whereas men wouldn't think twice. Men would want to help a brother out, get him notes. The next line, teach me to serve you as you deserve. Boys serve their desires and all the false idols in their lives. They treat their day with lots of instinct and every they look at their day as if it's a chore. Whereas men prioritize God and find time for God every day. In the next line of prayer, to give and not to count the cost. For example, if a group was going to a party and everybody was drinking, boys would probably try to force an unwilling friend into being that designated driver. Whereas a man would just stand up for everybody and want to help serve everyone and help make sure everyone is safe and would be the designated driver. In the next two lines of prayer, to fight and not to bleed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest. Boys seek comfort in the status quo. Men do what is right regardless of the situation and don't really easily fall into temptation. Boys find pleasure in objectifying women frequently, treating women as if they're a thing to pass the time. Go from one to the next. I'm bored with this girl. I'm going to go on to the next one. Whereas men really desire to know a woman and take their relationship with that woman seriously. The next line of the prayer, to labor and not to seek reward. Boys do things do difficult tasks because they want to be honored. They want everyone to see how good they are. I mean, I know at times I definitely fall with this. I want to be known that I did this thing. Whereas probably one of the greatest examples of humility, Saint Joseph, the father of Christ. He did a lot. Yet you only hear his name. I could probably count with my fingers how many times his name was actually mentioned in the gospel. And then the last line of the prayer: "Saved that I'm knowing that I'm doing your will." All men of Christ want above anything is to know that they've ultimately done God's will. But at this point in our lives, many of us, including myself at times, want to control our lives and everything that we do. We want to, like I said, we want to control everything. We're in college studying. Society's telling us, get the best job you can get. Get all the money that you can get. Increase your status among society. And yes, we do need to provide for ourselves and provide for our family. That's why we're all here. But if society will tell you money will solve all your problems, but how are we going to be good men for our future wives, children, family, and friends if our only desire right now in these formational years is to focus on our career, what money can bring us? As future husbands and fathers, we need to begin to recognize how important it is now that we start to kind of build better habits. A lot of us, maybe even some of us are probably juniors and seniors. Just as fast as college has gone by, many of us will probably be married and having children, 3 or 4 years later than now. And that's a humbling reality. We need to kind of start to realize that that is a real thing. We will be responsible in part for getting our wives to heaven, getting our children to heaven, and getting our friends and family into heaven as well. I want to talk about some practical ways and some things to take with you in order to become men of Christ. There's lots of ways to become men of Christ. These are just a few that I find very important. The first and probably the most important is to dive into prayer with God and contemplate everything that He's done for us. You hear a lot of times in homilies, at different spiritual talks, pray and all of your issues will be solved. Pray to God and you will come to know Him. And at a certain point, it becomes kind of cliche. I mean, I know myself when I hear this, it's kind of I get it, you've said it a million times. But until you really give it a shot, it's very difficult to understand how much prayer can change your life. And there's no set in stone way to pray. There's lots of different ways to pray. We can pray set prayers. Our Fathers, Hail Marys. We can pray the Rosary. We can be in conversation with the Lord. Instead of a lot of times I'll do it too. We can kind of try to pray and it ends up being just a conversation with ourselves. And just trying to be aware of that and direct that to God instead. God, this is what I'm dealing with. Can you help me out? God, what do you want me to do in this situation? Instead of kind of thinking about to ourselves. That'll help build our conscience up. You can also meditate with God. How is my day going in each and everything that I've done? Has that pointed me towards God? It's very important to find silence as well. In 1 Kings, Elijah goes up to a mountain. He's trying to pray to God. He's trying to talk to God. And there's lots of storms going on. There's thunder, lightning. There's even earthquakes. He's having lots of difficulty. He can't hear God. He can't talk to God. He feels like he just can't get to Him. But then after all these storms go away, the earthquakes cease. Silence comes. God appears, and he is able to pray, to focus all of his thoughts to God. And in the same way, there's a lot of things going on in our lives. We need to be able to find that silence in our day to direct that towards God. And in prayer, it's very important. I've said this before, to ask the Lord, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do, Lord? If we are persistent with God, He will answer our prayers. It's a difficult thing. It's not an easy thing to just sit in silence and talk to God. But if we are persistent, it will come. And God's going to answer our prayers, maybe not in the ways that we like, or not in the most natural ways. Unfortunately, we can talk to God, but it's not as much. We can treat it like talking to another person, but that is the kind of mystery of prayer. We're trying to talk to God. Like I said before, if we're persistent with Him, He will reveal certain things to us. And I found in my life, it's not necessarily like I pray and then all of a sudden a thought comes to mind, like that's what you should do. Like, God, what should I do? Oh, you should do this. It's not really like that. It's more of like, I pray about a certain thing, or about a certain relationship that I'm in, or a certain thing that I have to do in the future. I'm aware of what's going on around me, and I can see certain things, some weird things happen. Like, that was probably God. That was probably God putting this person in my life. That's normally the way that seems to be the more natural way that God has answered prayers in my life and many others. You will see that if you are persistent with God and you try to get to Him in prayer, and you try to focus on, like I had said before, like asking God, like, what do you want from me? God's will and your will are going to start to align. I found that in my life. There were many times that I was anxious of, like, I think I know what I want to do, but I don't know if that's what God wants me to do. And through just spending time with Him in prayer, I've been comforted in knowing that, like, I'm pretty sure that I'm doing what God wants me to do. It's brought lots of comfort and peace in my life. I know several guys that I've been able to walk with over the past couple of years, and I've known them kind of before they had a conversion and after. I asked them, like, why, like, what changed? What changed about your life that you're so on fire for God? And they tell me prayer. Like they're like, I don't really know how. I just know that, I don't know how, I don't know why, but I know that when I spent time with God and I prayed to Him about certain things, He revealed certain answers to me that made those guys peaceful, brought a lot more peace in their life, and they're greater men because of that. Then another important thing to take with you is to take part in the sacraments. Try to make it to Sunday Mass as often as you can. Try to make the daily Mass as often as you can. Spend more time around men who desire to be with God. In Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. I believe that this is extremely important. We need to be around men who we know will build us up and help us to become better men. And in turn, all the men that we are with, we can all as a group rise up and be better men for God together. That's been one of the most influential things in my life, especially over the past 2 or 3 years. We also can develop virtue and wisdom, courage, and temperance. I find that probably in college, temperance is probably the most important. Temperance, self-control. There's a lot of things going on in college, especially at LSU. There's a lot of exterior things going on. We just need to be able to build some self-control and know that we can make the right decisions. Like St. Ignatius also gives us another term called agere contra, which means to act against sinful desires, and in turn to desire the virtuous opposite of those sinful desires. From the Latin means to act against or to do the opposite. So what St. Ignatius is basically saying is that take the things that are taking you away from the Lord. Take the sins that are holding you back from God. That are holding you back from becoming a better man. Kind of grow a pair and fight at that, attack that. It's a call for courage. It's a call for strength. It's not an easy thing to look at the things we've done and have a complete reversion. With time, that'll come if we are persistent and if we really do desire to become better men. It's also very important to reevaluate our desires and ask, why are we doing everything that we do? all the decisions on like who we spend our time with, or the certain things that we do about in our day. Does this decision to spend time with this person, or does this decision to do this certain thing, does this bring me closer to God? Does it make me a better man? I had a priest introduce this to me, like, we were in spiritual direction, and he was kind of explaining, like, yeah, like, I was thinking about a certain decision that I needed to make, and he was like, he was just blunt with me, and he was just like, does it bring you closer to God? Is there a possibility that it brings you closer to God? So I've now tried to apply this to a lot of decisions I've made, and I found that it has brought a lot of peace in my life. In conclusion, thank you all for coming to Tiger Awakening. You made the decision to be here. And this definitely shows that you desire to be better men for God. We are not pleased with our current lives. There's things holding us back. I know personally, like, there's still things holding me back from being a better man. Begin to spend time conversing with the Lord in prayer. Ask Him, what do you desire from me, Lord? Develop trust in Him. Be persistent with Him, and He will clean up our lives. I hold this true, and I believe that God desires for all of us to be in heaven. And end in a prayer. Take, Lord, and receive all of my liberty, my memory, my understanding, and my entire will. All I have and call my own. You have given all to me, Lord. To you I return it. Everything is yours. Do with it what you will. Give me only your love and your grace. That is enough for me. In the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Thank you.